A very good afternoon to each and every one of you. I, Kritika, on behalf of NEN and Wadhwani Foundation, would like to welcome you all for this webinar and also introduce our expert, Dr. Radha Iyer. Radha Iyer is currently an associate professor with KJ Somaiya Institute of Management Studies and Research in the area of entrepreneurship. Radha has a PhD from SNDT, Mumbai. In the area of entrepreneurship, she has facilitated faculty development programs for NEN, faculty of Mumbai University, and faculty of engineering and pharmaceutical colleges in Mumbai and Midcon. She is also the visiting faculty at IIM Ranchi. Her areas of teaching interest include entrepreneurship, creativity and innovation, social entrepreneurship, and new venture marketing. At this time, we would also like to inform all participants a little more about this program. The webinar that you're attending now is part of a webinar series that targets to support entrepreneurs. After this webinar, in about 4 weeks, there will be a follow-up webinar, especially for you to clarify questions on what you have learned in this webinar. We will also provide you a form that needs to be filled. And after the second follow-up webinar, shortlisted candidates will be selected for further support from faculty mentors and mentoring units as appropriate. Now, before I hand over the floor to Dr. Radha, here are a few reminders for the audience. You will all be on mute by default. You may ask a question by typing in the panel provided. We will address your questions during the question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. Over to you, Dr. Radha.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Happy to have all of you signed up for the webinar. The assumption is that I'll spend around 45 minutes to 50 minutes to discuss what I have. So I have a slide presentation which includes around 10 odd slides. So I'll run through each of these slides and then we'll take Q&A as we go along. So my assumption is that most of you who have signed up for this have an idea or have an idea and have already started up. So this is more for people who basically have the idea. And just give me a second. Why is the slides are not going? Okay, yeah, so I got that. So what we're trying to say is that once you have an idea, you have to figure out whether the idea is going to be successful or not. You basically have to figure out whether the idea, you should spend time on it and effort and resources rather than just plunging into the venture right away. So if you do an opportunity evaluation, so there's a framework which we're going to spend time with you discussing, which is called the 7-domain framework. If you do the 7-domain framework, then what happens is that it helps you understand and assess and evaluate opportunities, and it also helps you create, shape, and recognize and seize the opportunity. Normally what happens with opportunity is that you look at what you have, your domain experience. Typically you look at who you are, what you want to be doing, and who are the people who will help you to run your idea and make it successful. So having done that, then you look at whether there's an opportunity and whether you should actually spend all your effort on that. Many of you would be ideally working, or you may be students, or you may be homemakers, and spending time on a wrong idea and going a lot beyond that, and probably putting in money and starting off something, that's not something which makes good sense. So that's why the opportunity evaluation framework would help you. So what we're trying to say is that you have to figure out when an idea is an opportunity. So when do you do that? You basically look at your idea and see whether it actually adds some value to the customer or the end user. Now, very often what happens is that ideas come from maybe your engineering college project, maybe some customer pain that you saw, or some individual pain that you had. Okay, so for example, I'll tell you a story about this goodnight mat. Many of you would have used use a good night mat. So the good night mat basically came into being because the gentleman, Mr. Mohan, his child was suffering, and the mosquitoes were biting, and that's when he said that it was a personal pain, and he said, if I have this pain, many others will also have a similar pain. So he was an urban Mumbaiite and one of the suburbs in Bombay, and therefore he figured out that that idea could actually be an opportunity. Then there are many things which he did later on, but that could be one way of looking at ideas. So first you need to figure out that that your idea creates value to the customer or the end user. In entrepreneurship, you want the customer to pay. So unless you get money, it does not make sense. You have to be profitable. So unless the customer is willing to pay, you don't have a business at all. So the next point is that your idea is an opportunity when it solves a significant problem or meeting a significant want or need. Also, so it is a little repetition of the first one. The next thing we are saying is that there has to be a robust market. You can't have very few people buying into your idea. Then you will not be successful. And so there has to be a robust market. People must want to buy your product or service, and there should be a margin that will create substantial value to the potential stakeholders. So there has to be some value that has to be created by your idea. So my life becomes better, smarter, quicker, faster, those kind of things. So so the example of, let's say, bookmyshow.com. So bookmyshow is basically a website where you can order your tickets online, movie tickets online. So is there a robust market? How many people are actually going to the movies? So that is your market. And then does it create substantial value to the potential stakeholders? Yes, it does. I'm sitting in my room and I just go online and buy my tickets. So that it does create substantial value, right? The next is that, is it a good fit between the founders and management team and marketplace along with attractive risk-reward balance? So what we mean by this is that when you as a founder start a business, there should be an attractive market, and also there should be a risk-reward balance. Very often what happens is that entrepreneurs feel that they are really pushed into a corner. You don't want that. You also have to make money, and there has to be, you take a risk as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is all about risk and uncertainty. So you take a risk, but then there has to be some kind of reward that you get back. So is that reward really worth your while? Is it something that you want to pursue? So all of that is what you need to understand when you're looking at creating an opportunity from an idea. Okay. Now, to help understand this, there's a gentleman called Professor John Mullins. John is basically from London Business School, and we attended a lot of training programs through NEN where John was the faculty and the facilitator. So he has written a nice book. It's called New Business Road Test. So the 7-domain framework that I'm going to spend time with you discussing is from his textbook, which is called New Business Road Test. So it's a simple analogy. So what it says is that when you buy a car, you typically will take it for a trial run or a test drive and see whether it makes sense, whether it fits your pocket, how comfortable it is, etc., etc., the mileage, the fuel efficiency, and so on and so forth. Similarly, when you're looking at actually plunging from an idea to starting a business, you should take your idea through a road test. So that's why the analogy of a new business road test. Okay. I hope I'm okay so far. I'll move to the next slide to get into specifics. So what he says is that earlier there was nobody, I'm sure many of us have parents, siblings as entrepreneurs. Now, did they have knowledge about the 7 domains? Obviously not. But somewhere in the back of their mind, they must have looked at all of this. Whereas right now, for you, because we are where we are in today's day and time, there is a scientific methodology, there is an objective methodology to understand whether your idea can become an opportunity. So what he says is that you can look at the 7 domain framework that you have on your laptop or your comp or whichever device that you're using just now. It speaks about 2 domains, which is market and industry. The market domain is further split into macro and micro level, which is on the left-hand side of your screen. And the industry domain, which is on the right, is again industry attractiveness and sustainable advantage. So there are 4 of them. And middle is your team domain. So largely it is market, industry, and team. Then there's a further split. So I don't want to, I mean, lots of this may seem like jargon. So what I'm going to try and do over the next few slides is try and get you to understand this through maybe a couple of examples. I'm going to be using some examples which are Indian, some which are international examples. So let's take it one at a time. So see, his first 2 dimensions are market and industry. So there is an overlap between this. Very often, we use words like sector, we use words like area, instead of industry. So he makes a clear distinction, and in the 7 domain, he describes very clearly what is a market, what is an industry, and therefore, if you clarify this thought and you know this for your business or your idea, you'd be far more ready to understand whether you should actually plunge into this business or not. So let's look at the first one, which is market domain macro level. So what do we understand by market domain macro level? Here we're trying to see, you should know whether, when you start this, when you start thinking of your idea, is that what is the size of the business? Are you going to be really huge, or are you going to be a small lifestyle business, or do you want to be a niche business? So what do you mean by huge businesses? So if I were to look at Kishore Biyani, and did he envisage that he's going to be a real huge business? One doesn't know. I haven't read enough about him, but those are examples of huge businesses. Okay, a small lifestyle business is your neighborhood coffee shop, which is small. Your small medium enterprises, family managed businesses, which don't go beyond a certain size, a certain turnover. So those are your examples of lifestyle businesses. As an entrepreneur, we need to understand, what are our aspirations? What is it that we would like our business to be? So I have friends of mine, when they were starting up, and they would say that, I want to sell this to, they had a children e-commerce company. So they would say that, we would sell this to Disney, we'll sell this to Disney. So that is when you think, that is when your aspirations are for that you want to have a very huge business. A lifestyle business is, a mom and pop store, maybe something small. A niche is when you only target a certain group of audience, a certain customer segment. Okay, so a very simple example of niche is there is this Kishore Biyani store called All. All is basically a plus size store for clothes, for apparels. So that is your niche. That's one example, but there's a large organization with one small niche. I'll give you another example. A niche you could look at. There's this company called Calorie Care. Calorie Care was one of the first movers. They are into diet food. So they would send diet tiffins in urban Mumbai metro. So that's basically what is your niche. So you want to figure out whether you want to do it in certain areas only. So that's your niche. The other example is Enrich. Enrich the salons, beauty, health in the healthcare sector. So or wellness, more wellness than healthcare. So that is a niche. They are saying that we will only do salons. We will not move to spas right now. That's not what we want to diversify into. Though they are huge, they are 54 stores, but they are still niche in that, or they only want to work in that area. Okay. The next thing, so if you could spend a minute or two for yourself reflecting on what should be the size of your business, that would be helpful. The next is the size of the business will determine the rest of the things that follow. So we're looking at size of the market. You know, what is the number of customers that are there in this area? So where do you get that data from? As an entrepreneur, you're young, you have no clue, right? So where do you get that data from? Number of customers, what is the aggregate money spent, number of units bought annually. So let me, you know, drive that with an example of Redbus. So, you know, Redbus, if you know the story of Redbus, many of you will know. Let me just spend a minute, doing a quick recollection. So Redbus is an online ticketing venture, which is only for buses. So, so the thing is, and they've started with Bangalore, right? So they would have looked at how many people are moving out of Bangalore, so Bangalore IT city, what is the migrant population, how often do they go, and how, so aggregate money spent. Do I go once a year? Do I go twice a year from Bangalore to Hyderabad or from Bangalore to Chennai? So do I go once every month? So there is some amount of money. So a quick dipstick is what you do. Entrepreneurs don't have too much money, so they will not look at doing a large research, etc. But by far and large, through friends, family, you know, a small primary research, you'll figure out what is the money that is being spent every month for a person who's going from Bangalore to somewhere else. Number of units bought annually. So do I do it once a month, twice a month, and things like that. So that's your example of your size of the market. So for some businesses, it is easy for you to figure out the size of the market, but for others it may be difficult. But there you might have to do some ratification. So for example, you know, if you were a color TV company, okay, what you would say is that you would look at how many personal computers were bought, and you might say that based on that, so 80% of that population will buy color TV or something like that, which is very similar to your industry. Okay, so everybody who goes for a spa treatment, hair spa, will also go for a health spa, you know, things like that. So that's where you look at numbers. So first thing is that you need to know the size of the business. Next, you look at size of the market. The next is you look at growth prospects, okay, of the market. So what are the growth prospects for 6 months, 2 years, 5 years? See, you are going to be in business so that you put in your effort, time, money. You might probably leave your job. So there's a lot of things that you would do, that you give up. Sorry, not forgiving. That you give up to start up your business. So you should know what are the growth prospects of the market. So some kind of forecasting you need to do, whether, you know, to look at it from 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the line. Now, if you were to look at the health industry, again, you know, so you know very well that the number of people with heart diseases are high. So if you're a medical devices person, you know, there are these small things called Fitbits which you wear on your arm when you exercise and things like that. So let's say you're a medical devices company, health devices, you know, whatever you call them. So you want to know, you know that the growth prospects of that kind of a market is going to be high. People are going to be health conscious, and that's the way of life. So that's basically what you call a sunrise industry. So you look at what are the growth prospects of the market. How fast has the market grown in the last 2 to 5 years? So if you were to look at an example of a coffee day maybe, okay, so and you want to set up a small coffee shop. So how fast has the market grown? You know, how many coffee stores have happened? There's Costa, there's Barista, there's CCD, and there are, you know, Mocha and various other brands that have come up. So how fast has the market grown? How many organizations have come up in this space? So that's something that you need to understand. So these are things that you need to put down for yourself, and you could use this PPT to just put all of that, to give it some kind of to give yourself some kind of a landscape, so that you know whether you're going to be entering into the business and you're going to be making profits or not. Moving ahead, we look at the next one, which is your macro level. How do you get this data? So, you know, for the previous slide, you're saying that you need to know size of the market. You need to know the size of, you know, how big is the industry going to grow, etc. So here, what we're saying is that you know, you could look at data, and look at data from secondary sources or the internet. Now, sometimes the data is very difficult to figure out whether that data is relevant for you or not. I'll give you an example. So one of the people who I know was looking at creating what do you call okay, let me reframe this. So you have whey protein. So when you curdle milk, or when you curdle milk, what happens is that there's whey protein and there's paneer which comes off, which is your cottage cheese, right? So the water that drains off after you make the cheese, that contains a lot of proteins, and that's what is used to make whey powder. So one of my students was looking at creating a bee plan around that. So he was basically looking at putting it in a Tetra Pak, flavoring, adding flavorings, emulsifiers, etc., colors, taste, whatever, and then putting it into a Tetra Pak and selling it. So that was his idea. But when he was looking at secondary data, he got a lot of data which says there were 5 reports which said that this is the milk consumption in India, or this is the milk production in India. Okay, so because for him milk production and then paneer creation, and therefore he will need to know how much whey is available, right? So you might have challenges like that to figure out secondary data sources, but you have to pick 3 or 4 of these, and then look at you probably, when you are making a forecast, use the lowest number so that you know that is what is reality. That's what is reality. So when I was looking at some of your ideas, many of you are looking at employability as an example. So wanting to teach soft skills to engineering college institutions. So if I were to look at the market domain, I would need to know that you would need to know, when you're making your plan, understanding whether there's an opportunity, the number of engineering institutions in India. Similarly, if somebody is going to be looking at making chocolates, he or she would need to know the amount of chocolate consumption in India. So you need to get this data from secondary sources. Also, you need to understand broad macro environmental trends. You live in a society, they are not going to change too much. Okay, so getting people to change, getting consumer behavior to change is extremely difficult. So you need to understand what is the demographic, what are the social, cultural, what is the economic, technological, and natural things that are going around in the economy per se. So for example, when you're looking at demographics, if you're selling something which is for younger population, for 20-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 30-year-olds, then probably you need to understand how many people are there, what are their views, will they buy your product or not. Socio-cultural, I mean, this is not something which we do at all. In India, socially, culturally, this will not work. So you will not go into that kind of a business at all. So you need to figure out whether socio-culturally, whether it makes sense for you to get into this business. Okay. Economic, you also need to understand large mega trends on economy and try to see whether the economy is favorable or not. When you're talking about technological, what we mean by technological is that you have an idea and you think that's a great one, but then there is a lot of technological changes. It's very fast. Things are moving very, very frequently there. Okay, and then probably you need to your idea is not technologically very great. So then there is a challenge. The example is your disk drive industry. See, when you looked at earlier, what happened is that you had the large disks, and then after that you went on to the floppy, then you went to the CD, and then you went to the thumb drive, right, and the pen drive. So if technological advances are very, very fast in your industry, then you need to be wary and you need to be sure on that. Okay, so these are some things on macro environmental trends. We'll move along. Okay. Further, how do you get this data? So the first one, secondary data, again, it's a repetition. You can also look at trade and business publications, library and internet for secondary data. What we mean by this is that very often what happens is that there are associations or there are reports by, for example, APMDC. That is, or APIDA. So APIDA is agricultural produce, and export. I think I can't recollect the full form. But if you're doing anything in fruits, vegetables, etc., so you would look at their business publications and their trade reports. Like that, there would be. So if you're looking at the gems industry, So you need to look at their business publication and trade publications. Look at reports which tell you some figures on which you can base your opportunity on. Next is government reports. There are a lot of government reports. So when you're looking at education, you'll have a lot of government reports which will give you some kind of figures. Okay, so that is important. Then when you move to the next part, what I have mentioned here is that you also would get some data from primary sources like interviews, observations, focus groups, surveys, market experiments, etc. Now, I don't want to be delving so much into all of this, the first few of them. What we're trying to say is that you ask your friends, you ask people in the trade or people in the business and see whether you know whether they think that this is a great idea or not. So which is where the last point in that is conversations from suppliers or competitors. Okay, so you need to understand that you will have, when you run a business, there might be vendors, there might be people who are going to be work with your employees. So you need to talk to some of them to try and just authenticate your idea. Okay, and largely you need to interpret all this. So you have all this information that you pick up from various sources. You put them together and think whether does this make sense for me? Is this something that is there an opportunity for in this area for my business, for this idea of mine? Okay. Moving ahead, we are saying that the next thing is basically what is known as what we look at the industry and the macro level. Now, this is for people who are not an MBA student. This may seem like jargon, but I'm going to be talking about it from a very, very layman perspective. What we're saying is that you need to use Michael Porter's 5-force model to understand, whether the industry is attractive or not. So the first thing that you would do is that you would look at whether there is a threat for an entry into this business. Very often what happens is when you're an entrepreneur, you don't have control over your resources. You have no money, right? So you're basically looking at how do you source money from different areas. So you typically tend to start businesses where you don't have too much of capital expenditure. Whereas sometimes what happens is that if you have a high fixed cost, none of the other entrepreneurs will get into your business because no other entrepreneur can actually have so much money to come into that. So a high fixed cost is a threat of entry. Or stringent IPR or pharmaceutical businesses. So if there is intellectual property which is really stringent, you can't make too many changes around a product or service because there's already an IPR in that. Okay, then the threat of entry is quite high. The other example is your pharmaceutical business. So John Mullen's textbook talks about a product by I can't recollect the name of the organization. It's a product called Zantac. Zantac is a antacid, and how they create an IPR, and the IPR is typically for 12 years. But after 12 years, they do very good business, they make a lot of money, and they're very profitable in that sense there. But after 12 years, any other company can also make something which is like Zantac and put it up in the market. So knowing that, what this company did was they looked at Zantac, and then they did another milder version of Zantac. 12 years, there was, people knew about Zantac. They understood that there is a brand around that. So 12 years, if I'm bombarded with Zantac and I'm also using it, I know the name. So if a milder version comes, I will still go and buy that product, then some other product. So that is your example of threat of entry. The next is buyer power. Very often what happens is that you might start a business which is a B2B business or a B2C business. In B2B businesses, sometimes the buyers may have higher power. What do we mean by buyer power? By buyer power, we mean that the buyer dictates prices to you. The buyer will dictate terms to you. So one of the reasons why, as an entrepreneur, when you start off, very often what happens is that entrepreneurs tend to give price discounts. So they will be cheaper, or they will be far more economical compared to other competitors. So therefore the buyer pushes you, and therefore you provide a discount. But then that discount may not be something that you are able to sustain throughout. So you need to understand who has the power. Does the buyer have the power, or does the supplier have the power? So you need to understand for your business what is the power that the buyer has. The next is the supplier power. What do we mean by supplier power? So I put an example there which is about Alatrin. Sometimes what happens is that you are dependent on only one supplier for your product or service which you want to get into. And if that is the case, then automatically what happens, the supplier power is high. The example is, again, this Goodnight Mat case that Goodnight Mat example, where, Alatrin is a raw material which is used in mosquito repellents. And that is something that Goodnight as an organization, Transelectra as an organization basically, would import. And so if that import stopped, then there's nothing, then there's no product, then there's no Goodnight Mat. So the point is that, and what this company Sumitomo did at that point in time, it said to Transelectra, I will give it to you and I will give it to others also. So the fact is that then there are going to be more competition. So the supplier power, is an important aspect to understand for your business. The next point is substitutes. See, there are n number of substitutes for your product or service. Okay, very often naive entrepreneurs, what they would say is that there is no substitute. I don't have any competition, etc. Okay, so substitutes means that instead of your product or service, what else can I use? Simple example which works best, very beautifully written in the book, is about, when you're hungry, what do? You either carry your tiffin. Let's say I'm talking about a working population, somebody who goes to office. Okay, you carry your tiffin from home. There's a canteen downstairs where you go and pick up your food when you want to have lunch. You get out of your office premises. On the roadside there are 3-4 stalls. Then there is a restaurant. Then there's a small mom and pop store which sells some sandwiches and which just sells maybe chips and your Lays or something like that. So you could eat any of these. So all of these are your examples of substitutes. So it is, and let's say you wanted to start a canteen in your premises. All of these are your substitutes. So you need to understand that substitutes create a threat. So you should be aware of what the substitutes. Okay. The next is competitive rivalry. You have to know that probably you are either the first mover in your venture or your idea, or you might be a second, third, late mover. Now, being the first mover has challenges, and being the late mover also has challenges. I will not go into that. So what you only need to understand is that competition will obviously exist, would have existed earlier also if you're not a first mover. And sometimes competitors may have deep pockets, so they might just thrash you out. So if you have a product of 10 bucks, that guy will sell his product at 2 rupees or 3 rupees, and then you're completely wiped out. Okay, so you need to understand that competitive rivalry may exist. So you want to know whether this industry is attractive or not based on all of this, and then you make some kind of you basically cull out this data and then try and say, does this make sense for me to get into this business? The next couple of things that you want to know is future changes in the industry. How do you think is this industry going to change? So, are there any, so your environment will also come into play. Is this going to be a growth? Is this going to be a growing industry? What are the future changes? Our technology is going to come and change this industry. Okay, and lastly, you need to define your industry. What do you mean by define your industry? I'll give you an example. All of us go and watch movies, weekends or otherwise. So what happens is that, let's say you are sometimes you don't know whether you're in the cinema industry or whether you are in the whether films are the industry, or is the theater an industry. So are you going to be competing with the PVRs of this world, or are you going to be with the filmmaking? So the fact is that if you're going to be starting a theater, okay, you're going to put up money, you're going to be using some space, you're going to rent out something, etc. So then you're creating a theater. But the fact is that maybe the film industry is not doing very well, and you think you're in the cinema industry. So you need to understand which industry you're in. So for example, let's go back to the Red Bus example. Red Bus is a ticketing company for buses. So the Red Bus industry could also be, is it into online? It is an online a provider for bus tickets. So what industry are they in? Are they in the travel industry? Are they in the bus ticket industry? So it's important for you to understand that. So based on that, then you can look at competition. Okay. Let's move to the next slide. I hope I've been audible and you're asking your questions. So, the first one, this is market domain micro level, which is, if we're looking at the 7 domains. So this is the I think, third quadrant that we are doing, which is market domain micro level. So naive entrepreneurs say we have no competition. I must share with you, today I have seen a business plan which one of 2 youngsters have written, and they say they have no competition. And I went and Googled and I found that there are 4 or 5 people selling the same products. So the fact is that you should be aware of who are your competitors. You should also be aware of who are your substitutes. Prudent ones ask the question, is there a customer segment willing to pay for a compelling benefit? Is there a resolution of a pain? So normally all ideas come with customer dissatisfaction or customer pain. I'll give you an example of customer pain. Domino's pizza, all of us have eaten it at some point in time or the other, or majority of us have eaten it at some point or the other. So Domino's, basically, when they started, they were outside some university campus in the US. And what happened is that they would have all these students coming in and eating their pizzas at some point in time or the other during the day. But then during examination time, they found that there aren't too many visitors to their pizza place. So then what they figured out, the customer pain is that the travel to the pizza store or during the exam time is what is the customer pain. So they decided, let's resolve that pain and give them a compelling benefit, where they said that we will do door delivery, and that's how they looked at what is the customer pain, and they tried to overcome that. The other example, if you're young and and you're a girl, then automatically at some point in time, majority of when you were a child as a girl, the young ones would have played with Barbie dolls. Okay, so how did the Barbie doll come into being? So the lady who was actually the mother of one of these children, she came home and she worked with this company called Mattel, and Mattel, how you pronounce it. So she came home and she saw her child playing with just a regular doll, and she was ascribing roles to that doll. So, as a doctor, a teacher, whatever else that she was doing. So then she figured out that the customer segment is a child, and the customer had a pain. The pain that the customer had is that she did not have enough of dolls with different roles that the dolls could play. And then, so therefore she figured that out, and then she said, let's try and create dolls, different variations of dolls, and each of these dolls would play a certain kind of role. So what we're saying is you need to understand that the customer has a pain and he will pay for that product or service. The next point is, are these benefits clearly differentiated in the customer's mind? Is it better, faster, cheaper? Very often what happens is that all products, all services come with the tagline that you're better, faster, cheaper. But somewhere, you need to know for your idea whether it is really so, whether it is really better, faster, and cheaper. And next thing again, size and growth rate of the segment. So are children going to continuously buy dolls? Would parents actually keep on spending more and more money on toys? So that's your size and growth rate of the segment. The next one is, will entering this segment allow entry into related segments? So I go back to my example of Enrich salons. So Enrich basically is in the wellness sector. So entry into the wellness sector through salons, will it give me entry into spas, beauty clinics, skin clinics, and so on and so forth? So will entry into this segment allow entry into related segments? So if you look at large organizations, Many of them are doing this, right? So you enter into one segment, and then after that you get into foods, and then after that you get into various other products. So the point is, you start with biscuits, and then you do cheese, and then you do milk, or you start with milk. Example of Govardhan. Govardhan is a milk and a dairy company based out of Maharashtra. So first they started with milk. Now they have specialized milk called Pride of the Cow. Then they have cheese, and then and various different variants of dairy products. So will this entry into this segment allow entry into related segments? Okay. Now let's move. Okay, I hope I'm clear so far. Please drop in your questions so that I'm able to answer them. If you want to relate it to your idea, you can write down what your idea is also, and then I can take it ahead. The next, basically, what we're saying is to do with industry domains, micro level. Here we're trying to say is that is the business model sustainable? So is this something which will probably be sustained over a period of time or not? Okay. So here for that, what you need to do is that you need to look at what are the barriers to imitation, and what are the barriers to imitation? What is it that you can have which will stop others from getting into as competitors? So you could look at proprietary elements, which are trade secrets, patents. Very often what happens is that entrepreneurs start because they have a patented product, or they have made some kind of a product which they think can be patented, and then they start. So the example of proprietary elements, trade secrets, the example is Coke. So Coke basically has a trade secret which is somewhere, in some, I believe it is in some vault somewhere in Atlanta. So that's your example of a trade secret. Or the other example is, a flippant example is this. There's a movie called Chicken Kurana, Chicken Kurana, So the guy knows how to make that chicken, and that's a trade secret. So the point is that what are your proprietary elements, what are the trade secrets, if you have a patent. The next is your organizational capabilities. So, or it could also be a brand. Okay. Now, entrepreneurs don't take a long time to create a brand. So it's difficult for entrepreneurs to have a brand. If you have a brand, then that obviously is a barrier to imitation. So having said that, that's a little difficult. So let's move to organization capabilities. So the next point is the organization capabilities. What is it that you do different, which is basically, or your venture does different, which is why your capabilities are better. Okay, so that is what you need to understand. So your example of your organizational capabilities is an example of this company called Nokia. Many of us would have had Nokia phones at some point in time or the other. So Nokia is a very small organization, and they moved from making wood and paper pulp. They're based in Finland, and then they moved to making your cell phones. So the point is that their organization capabilities were very good, and therefore they were able to therefore they were able to be successful. Okay, so this is 10 years ago, before Apple came into being, but nevertheless they had good organizational capabilities. The next point to this micro level has to do with your investment. When we look at opportunity evaluation, you also have to understand the financial aspect. So you want to know whether it is an economically viable business model. So you have to assess risk. So you need to figure out what is the revenue with respect to investment. So what is the investment that you're making, and what is the revenue, and when will your break even be? How much is it that you're going to make, and how much money will you have to put in year 1, year 2, year 3, and then probably you have break even. Very often what happens is that entrepreneurs, or young entrepreneurs, they say that we will break even in 6 months, we will break even in 3 months. But you have to know that very often you put away a sum of money saying that this will be my investment, or you think that this should be your investment, whereas revenue projections may be flawed. So you need to understand that. So you should First, you need to know whether the customer will pay you, and you also need to know when that customer is going to give you the money. The next point in that is cost to acquire and retain customers. Sometimes customer acquisition cost is very high. Okay, so for example, I'll give an example of somebody who I knew, who started a coaching class to teach financial subjects. Okay, so what he did was he just put up a store, and he ran a class. He had faculty, and when he was looking at customers, he sent these pamphlets, brochures, small, in the newspaper to various institutions, colleges, stood outside the college and gave it to people, etc. So first lot batch came, second lot batch came, 20 students, 30 students. Okay, but after that he was not able to go back to the same community because there was only one course or two courses that he had. Okay, so your cost to acquire customers was high for him. Instead, if he had tied up with a couple of institutions, and his model became business to business instead of business to consumer, then the customer acquisition cost could have been low. So you need to understand what is the cost to acquire customers and what is the cost to retain customers. Customer retention becomes a challenge when you're an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs typically have very small number of people. Employee strength is small. So retaining them also costs you money. So what is it that, whether it's a loyalty program, whether it's a reward, what do you do to retain customers? Okay. Next is contribution margins and their adequacy. So what is a contribution margin? How much money are you going to make? And is it going to be adequate for you? For the next couple of years, or the next 2-3 years that you think that your business is going to be looking at. Last point on that is operating cash cycle characteristics. See, very often what happens is that entrepreneurs put up money, or they bootstrap, as you call it, where they put in their own money, or they put in money from friends, family and fools, as they're called, the 3 Fs. So what happens is that they start up like that, so they bootstrap, and then after that they run the business. While running the business, what happens is that you have an operating cash cycle, right? So you have to buy products, you have to sell products, or you have to buy raw material, you have to convert them, and then there is your operating cash cycle which takes. So the point is that when you're looking at working capital management, you need to know that you are right and your working capital management is positive. If your working capital management is positive and you do well in that, then automatically you don't need to raise funds from somewhere outside. You can probably be cash positive as you go along. So you have to figure that out. So the example is that sometimes the example here I'd like to share is about this company called eBay. Many of you know eBay. So eBay basically had, what it did was when somebody listed a product for sale, there was some money that he had to pay, and then there was a commission. So once a sale happened, then there was a commission. eBay did not buy the product, did not store the product, so they did not need to have a warehousing, nothing. So they just contacted sellers and buyers, both of them together. So and suppliers also, so that is how, when you're looking at your operating cash cycle characteristics, one of the ways to do that is to have a subscription-based model. When you have a subscription-based model, what happens is that people pay in money earlier before they take away their service. So if you're looking at gymnasiums, many of us would have paid for our gymnasium for a year long, or a health club for a year long, use, sorry. And then what you do is that you hardly use it, okay? So, but then the money has gone upfront. So that is your example of positive operation positive working capital management. Another example of this is this retail store called Costco, which is based out of US. They also have a subscription-based model. So they take in money when you subscribe to them, and then so they are always cash positive. So you have to understand, how are you going to sell your product? What is the revenue? What is investment? How much does it take for you to acquire the customer? And how much money are you going to spend on retaining a customer? What are the contribution margins and operating cash cycle? Very often you should, so therefore for operating cash cycle, you should know what is the industry trend. Is it a 30-day credit? Is it a 40-day credit? And so on and so forth. Okay. So, and also what you want is that the payments come first, the customer pays you first, and then this, and if the supplier can wait for his payment, and if you can delay that, then automatically, you are positive, you're in your accounts receivable. Okay. Next, so we have finished largely, the market and the micro level, industry and market, micro and macro level. The next thing that we are saying is that what is the first-hand experience in the industry that you have. So do you understand the industry? Do you know partners? Do you have a network of people who work in that industry? So, typically you would know that this industry, it works like this only. It's all subscription based. So people will not, or this is not a subscription based model. So people will not pay upfront. So you have to understand an industry makes a lot of difference. So plunging into an industry where you're very passionate about but you have no experience, that means you will have to relearn everything. So you have to learn everything about that industry. The fact is that having a domain knowledge in the industry, first-hand experience, makes a huge difference, okay, for your customers and for you as a business as well. Okay, so then lastly the slide says that such answers can't be found on the internet, and the micro factors are more important to evaluate. Okay, so you need to understand. So what is micro factors? Micro factors is all about whether the customer is interested, whether the customer will pay, how much money will he pay, and how will he pay. Okay. The last bit, the seventh aspect is about the team. See, entrepreneurship can be where you are a single person or if you're a team. So you have the concept of what is known as solo entrepreneurs and team entrepreneurs. So very often when you're looking at funding, if you want to raise funds from outsiders, whether it is a bank or whether it is angel investors, incubators, venture capitalists, etc., or if you want to move into an accelerator, they are going to be asking you something about the team. Normally funding they don't do very often if you're a single entrepreneur, okay, unless you have a great management team. So what they're saying is that management is what John Mullen speaks about, is that management is the most important factor. I have read a couple of other research papers also. All of them talk about this. So you have to understand, if you are going to be a team, what are your team's mission, personal aspirations, and risk propensity? What do we mean by this? So, do you know which industry that you want to be in? So that's your mission. Or in what area that you want to be in, what product, what service, or what kind of markets you want to be in. What are your personal aspirations? How big do you want to grow? Do you want to be a lifestyle business? Do you want to be a niche business? Or you really want to be scaling your business? So that's your personal aspirations. What is the risk propensity? How big, how soon? What do we mean by risk propensity? How much risk are you willing to take? Can I, so if I have 2 lakhs of savings, do I put that and that's my risk, that is the risk I take? Whereas, and then maybe 5 years down the line, I know that I might not have the 2 lakhs at all. So that's a risk I'm willing to take. Whereas you have a partner in the business and he says, I put in 2 lakhs, but I expect both my 2 lakhs both to come to me within a year. So you need to understand what is the risk, okay, and how big do you want to become and how soon. See, some businesses have the gestation period is long. It'll take you 2-3 years. If you're in the biotech industry, to actually get a product out, it might take you very long. So the point is, are you willing to wait? How big? How soon? So and so your partners, are they also willing to wait? The next point is that ability to execute critical success factors. So so every industry or every business will have some factors which are critical to the success of that venture. You should know what is a critical success factor for your business or your venture. Okay, so this is something that I can't explain without an example. So if I were to look at a senior citizens So for example, let's look at a hospital. So the critical success factor for a hospital is good doctors and post-operation care, right? So are you going to be able to succeed, execute on those two factors? Okay, so that is your ability on critical success factors. Now, if you are saying that you're going to be a discount store, okay, another example, if you're going to be a discount store, you know, how are you ensuring that you're going to keep your costs low and make it economical? So that is your critical success factor. Then responses across the value chain. So you have a value chain, and what are your responses across the value chain? How you know, are you going to be in distribution? Are you going to be in delivery? You know, in what is it that you're going to be in? In what area are you going to be focusing on? The last 2 points are competencies. What is your experience and what is your industry know-how? This I have dealt with earlier also, which speaks about domain experience in the last slide. Wherein what we're saying is that if you are a team, what happens is that it is best to have complementary skills. As an individual, all of us don't have all the skills. We'll have some skills, some things that we don't know, or some things we don't want to do at all because we don't like to do that. So try and team up with people who probably have those complementary skills along with you. So therefore, you need to understand what is your competency, what is your experience, and what is your industry know-how, and your partner's experience, industry know-how, and so on and so forth. The last point on this slide is on connectedness up and down the value chain. So if I'm opening a health bar, do I know nutritionists? Okay, do I know somebody who's a nutritionist, and you know, can he or she be part of my team? So that is your connectedness up and down the value chain. Do I know 5 gyms? Okay, whether it is your AF10 or whether it is your gold gym, etc. Do I have some connectedness to them where I can put up my health bar? So that is, you know, connectedness up the chain and lower down the chain. So people, you know, suppliers, vendors, employees are lower down the chain. Up the chain are your customers. So you know, what is the connectedness that you have there? If you don't have that, you should build that, is what it says here. And so there are a lot of benefits if you assess this, assess the team on these 3 or 4 parameters which are mentioned above on the slide. So I'll move to the next slide. So we finished with the 7 domain framework. Now what we're trying to say is that this is not additive. Okay, you can't add the features of all these 7 domains and say that it is a great idea, not great idea. Okay, so what we're saying is that, you know, you need to figure out why won't this work. Find the major flaw that cannot be resolved. If you find a major flaw and you think it cannot be resolved, then you will abandon that opportunity. You don't want to be spending more time and effort on that. If not, what do you do? You could have 2 outcomes. Best case is that resource providers identify the flaws and refuse you the resources needed. So what happens is that you go to an angel investor, or you go to a venture capitalist, or you go to the incubator. They find flaws in your opportunity, and then they say, I will not give you any money. Worst case is that you get the money from them and then you start the business, and then you discover the flaws later. So the point is that you should not be in the worst case scenario. So it is better to find out what the flaws, see whether it can be resolved. If it cannot be resolved, we need to abandon the opportunity. We look at something else which is new. Okay, entrepreneurship is all about ideas. And then what we're saying is some of these flaws can be shaped and developed. So very often what happens is the business model may be wrong, the customer profiling may be wrong, or maybe you're looking at the wrong customers. So you try and fix that. So different target market can be chosen, offering can be adapted. So you can do some tweaking, some changes, and therefore and that's how you could start the business. Opportunity can be pursued at a different level in the value chain. Additional individuals can be found. So what happens is that sometimes as a team, you don't have the right set of skills. I'm looking at the last point. Additional individuals can be found. You don't have people you don't have the team which is really good. So you can find others. So the example is this company called Oravel, O-R-A-V-E-L. So this is a bed and breakfast. So it's not bed and breakfast. It's basically like your guest houses. Okay, so what happens is like you have a room which you can give away, and so that is part of the inventory of Uravel. So there, the entrepreneur was very young, so he didn't have a team. So they found the business accelerator found a team which is basically the guy who came in along with the entrepreneur, came in with an operations experience, came in from the industry, and therefore, so that's how the accelerators help. So you will find additional individuals. So these are things that can be done. Okay, let's move on. So in short, I think I'm in the last but one slide of my presentation. What we're saying is that superior opportunity has a quality of being attractive, durable, timely. Oh my God. Okay, now you need to take a breath. And is anchored in product or service which creates or add values for its buyers or end users, usually by solving painful or serious problems. So opportunities, it's a repetition here again. Opportunities always start with customers and marketplace wants. So when you're looking at an idea, you need to be sure that the customer will buy the product, and he will actually use the product, and he will pay you for the product. So it's important for you to understand that. Okay, and so what most startups need to understand is that markets and industries are not the same. Macro and micro level considerations are necessary. And lastly, the entrepreneurial teams. You can't find entrepreneurial teams on the resumes, okay, or in assessing the entrepreneurial characters. You can't do a personality test or a psychometric test. You have to work with the other person. There has to be some kind of discussion. There has to be some discussion around that, and then after that, you will figure out whether it makes sense or no, for startups. Okay. So I think I'm done, and this is my last slide. I hope it's been helpful to you. So if there are any question answers, I'm open for discussion. Thank you so much for being a patient audience.
Thank you very much, Radha, for that interesting and engaging session. I will voice out a few questions from the audience so that you'll be able to take them one by one.
Sure.
Mr. Shreyansh Jain asks, what does bootstrapping mean? What does bootstrapping? Yes.
Bootstrapping means where an entrepreneur puts his own money to start his business.
Okay.
You got it? An entrepreneur funds his own business.
All right. Thanks, Radha.
Okay.
We have a few questions from Mr. Tunir Saha. So he says, since funding is always
Can you be a little loud? I can't hear you.
Sure. There's a few questions from Mr. There's a few questions from Mr. Sunir Saha, and he says that since funding is always a problem, is it okay or is it a bad idea to indulge in multiple businesses, even if they're correlated?
Yeah, so in India, you would have a lot of examples of having multiple businesses where entrepreneurs do multiple businesses. But having said that, when you're looking at funding, funders or your angel investors, incubators, etc., they would prefer that you focus on one business only. So that's one point I'd like to say here. The other thing that I'd like to say is that if you're looking at multiple businesses, then if you have a good management team, if you have a good rank of next round of managers who will manage your business for you, then it makes sense to be in multiple businesses. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Radha.
Hello?
Yeah. Thank you, Radha. Yeah. Thank you for that. Mr. Gopalnath asks this, what should an entrepreneur do to get funds?
So the point is that unless you put in some amount of money by yourself and you pilot a project, pilot your idea, only then can you go for funding, because most ideas don't get funded most pilots or early stage ventures do get funded in India. So the ecosystem has a lot of, the Indian ecosystem for entrepreneurship now has a lot of avenues. So you could look at, pitching your idea to accelerators, pitching your ideas to angel investors. So those are the first steps. Okay, then there are accelerators. If it's basically, there are organizations like T Labs, if you are in the space of technology and mobiles, etc., then they fund you. So the negative of funding is that you obviously have to give up your equity. So you need to know when you want to raise funds from the market. Okay.
Thanks for that.
Can I have your next question, Kritika?
Yeah, thanks for that, Radha. Mr. Mahesh Chandani says that he's an author who's writing a book on achieving a dream. So his question is, will my competition be publishers publishing books of similar kind, or will my competition be a particular author who has already written some books related to this subject many years ago?
Yeah, so there could be both. No, there are n number of people publishing, right? So I'm sure there are some of them already in the space which are available. So when you talk about, when in entrepreneurship, when you talk about mission, the team and the delivery, so that is about entrepreneurial dreams. So what is it that you are dreaming? So there would be, and then in this case there might be many substitutes also. So it may not be pure competition, it could be substitutes, it could be blogs, it could be websites, it could be various other things which also have similar content. I hope that answers, Mahesh.
Thank you, Radha. There's another question from Mr. Kashish. He says, hi ma'am, I want to ask you how to involve students in voluntary activities in social entrepreneurial projects.
So there are various methods of doing that. One of the easiest is if you are so there are various methods of doing that. So let me give you an example. So there is something called Enactus, ENACTUS. You could go and Google them, and then there is something called CII-YI, which is Confederation of Indian Industry, and YI is whatever YI, Young Indians, I think. Okay, so these are two organizations which involve a lot of students in student entrepreneurial projects. Then there is IDEX, IDEX Fellows. They do some social entrepreneurship. So there are people, there are a lot of ways to do that. You can have a campus ambassador for something like this, and you just have to go to an institution, and institutions also have mandates where they are looking at community and social entrepreneurship. So institutions will welcome this, certainly.
Thank you, Radha. Thank you for that.
Kritika, I hope I've answered that question. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we'll take the last few questions, Radha. It's
sure.
Yeah. Mr. Nuthan Verma asks, what's the difference between an accelerator and incubator?
So accelerators are earlier than incubators. So accelerators help you redo your business, recreate your business model, your business plan. So they don't actually give you money per se. They take equity and they help you redo your business model and your business plan largely, connect you to customers, maybe build the team for you also. So that's what accelerators tend to do. So you may, the way forward is that first you get into an accelerator, then you may get into an incubator. Okay, and incubators basically provide you infrastructure, they provide you mentors, they provide you legal advice probably, and incubators, largely you could have service-related incubators or infrastructure-related incubators. Infrastructure-related incubators give you place to stay and set up your office there, whereas service incubators just provide you, advice, counseling, and so on and so forth. The other thing on incubators is that you could have university related incubators, or many of the IIMs have incubators, so IITs have incubators, so that could be one. And there are private incubators also which exist in India.
All right. Thank you for that, Radha. We'll just take one other question.
Sure.
Mr. Jain asks, I have learnt and read in several places that you can be an entrepreneur at any age, but the Indian society claims that you can't start anything until you've graduated. So what do you suggest about it?
Yeah, you know, there are examples galore of people starting up. So one of them in India is this guy who ran a company called India Games. His name is Vishal Gondal. I think he finished his graduation, but very young from a startup perspective. I don't know much about his education, but the fact is that he was a startup and very young. So having said that, you know, there are both young and old who start entrepreneurial ventures. Your older entrepreneurial venture example is Captain Gopinath, who started quite late in life. Uday Kotak of Kotak, you know, the Kotak Group Financial Services Company. He is an example of somebody who started late but doing extremely well as an organization.
Okay. Thanks for that, Radha. We'll just take one more question before we, end this webinar. Mr. Rohan Homkar asks, how do we do manpower arrangement for our startup? Because most new graduates are not willing to work in startups. So how do we get manpower?
Yeah, so the manpower, you know, I understand that, you know, you as entrepreneurs, you have no money. So, so basically job satisfaction becomes an important aspect. So you could probably look at interns. So various institutions today look for internships. Students are looking for concurrent projects, or whatever way you call them, consultancy projects, concurrent projects, etc. So you look at you would need to break your jobs into smaller chunks and probably get people to do that. But there is a huge community of people people who want to work with startups, because startup experience is gaining popularity in India. So you know, you just need to look for people like that. Also, I know of HR, some recruiters, you know, who only work with recruitment for startups. I can't recollect the name of the person though, name of the organization, but there are organizations like that too. But obviously they come with a fee, and you need to pay a tag for you need to pay for their services. But if you are looking at interns, I'm sure many institutions would be willing to help you on this. You just need to get into the student network and the student body.
Great. So thank you very much again, Radha, for patiently answering all our questions. And I'd like to thank all our attendees for participating in this webinar. We're very happy that questions kept coming, but due to a lack of time, we're unable to answer all of them. So please feel free to write to us with your questions. And please do send in your feedback and suggestions to kritika@nenglobal.org. That would be KRUTHIKA@nenglobal.org. Also, if you found this session interesting, please feel free to blog or to post about it. And there were a few questions regarding this. Yes, the recorded version of the webinar will be available, and the recorded version will be available on www.youtube.com/user/eclubnen online. Again, that is youtube.com/user/eclubnen online. Yep, that's the address. And like I said in the beginning of the webinar, this is part of a webinar series, and there is a follow-up webinar that was going to come up in another 4 weeks. And we will write to you about the follow-up webinar as well. And again, thank you once again, and have a very pleasant evening.
Hi, Kritika. Hello. Kritika, can you hear me?
Hello? Hello, Meenakshi?
Hi, Kritika.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, Kritika, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
It was a really nice session, Kritika.
Oh, great. I'm relieved.
So you clicked on the start recording, right?
Yeah, I have to, one second.